And welcome back once again to How to Survive 2025. I'm Brian Keene.
I'm Dacia M. Arnold.
I am Jim Cobb.
And guys, welcome back. Good to be back with you. I couldn't be with you last week, although I was there listening. I just couldn't be on screen. Not for any nefarious reasons. I just had a lot going on in the background. We knew I couldn't participate, but it's good to be back with you. What are we talking about this week, Jim?
This week, we're going to talk about privacy and what we call OPSEC, which is a military term that the prepping world has co-opted like they do so often. You're both veterans. What does OPSEC mean from your perspective?
I can't speak for Dacia, but when you said we're going to be talking about OPSEC, my first reaction was,
PowerPoint to death.
Dacia, how about you?
So for me, operational security is what OPSEC stands for. I get really excited thinking about contingencies and stuff like that and planning ways to get around barriers. So operational security means not everyone knows what I'm doing, and not everyone's going to find out what I'm doing, and how can I safeguard my privacy. Now, in the military, you don't own anything, much less your privacy. But as citizens, there is a modicum of things that we can do to protect ourselves and our plans to ensure that no one thinks to get the better of us.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, you want to keep your preps under wraps. The idea is, the more people who know that you're a prepper, who know that, your house has a generator, your house has extra food and water, etc., the greater the risk is that those people are going to show up at your door looking for handouts, or if not handouts, looking to take what you have.
Right.
Crisis situation.
I think was World War II when the phrase "loose lips sink ships" came into common use. It's that same concept. That it's a fine line. And this is the struggle for a lot of people, where you don't want the general public to know that you're a prepper, okay? But at the same time, you want to encourage friends, family, loved ones, and even neighbors to jump on board with prepping, because the higher the number of people who prep, the less likely it is somebody's going to be bothering you in a crisis. If every house around you is as prepped as you are or better, then there's not a lot to worry about in the grand scheme of things, versus you're the only house on the block and everybody can hear that generator running and everybody wants to charge their phone or other devices, and hey, can we store some food in your refrigerator or your freezer, and can we do this, can we do that? And it can get ugly and really, really fast.
I think despite me being a co-host on this show, if anyone's listened more than one episode knows I have a bunch of books, but that's about it.
Well, yeah. And it's interesting because when you explore prepper social media, particularly Facebook, and the subject, people will frequently talk about how, they mention that they're a prepper, or a family member became aware that they're a prepper, and the phrase came into play, well, if something happens, I know where I'm going to your house. Okay. And that's often on social media countered with, well, if you show up here, you're not going to be leaving except in a pine box, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Rah, 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 rah. The problem is, well, some of our audience is probably old enough to remember watching the original run of The Twilight Zone.
The Shelter.
I can't remember what year it was that it came out, but it's an old one. It's black and white. And the premise of it is there's a family in the neighborhood who has a bomb shelter. And the neighbors all know that this family has a bomb shelter. And this is back when, bomb shelters were somewhat common, and an announcement comes over the radio that, they're about to be bombed, that some foreign entity is launched against them. And all of these neighbors show up trying to get into this family's bomb shelter, which is very small. It's like the size of a medium bedroom, and it's stocked with food and water and all this. And these people are clamoring and slamming on the door, trying to get in, trying to break in, which realistically, if they were to break the door down, then that, the integrity of the shelter is then compromised if there is radiation and fallout and yada, yada. But these people are, fighting tooth and nail to get inside, and the family inside is struggling to keep people out. And then the all clear is announced on the radio. There's no attack. It was a mistake. It was an error. And then the neighbors all kind of drift home. Say, sorry, we'll see you next week at the barbecue, this kind of thing. Think about how that would play out in real life.
Mm.
Let's say there's a limited duration event, okay? And you have family or friends who show up at your door asking for help, and you turn them away, possibly using force to do so. The disaster doesn't last forever. What happens when you see those people again after the fact? That's going to make Christmas dinner really awkward. Or, let's say your neighbor comes over and asks for help with something. Can I charge my phone? Can you spare some food? Whatever the case is, and you turn them away, possibly having to use violence to do it. And a month later, you happen to both be taking your garbage cans out to the end of the driveway at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
What's that conversation like? Now, when I talk about this, and when I have in the past, I frequently get people, well, what do you want me to do? Just give away all my stuff? No. What I want you to do is plan ahead. How are you specifically going to deal with this situation? Because everybody's plan is going to be different. There might be family members who aren't preppers, but you would welcome them with open arms for whatever reason, whether it's because of the relationship you have with them or because of what they bring to the table in terms of skills, that kind of thing. When we talk about OPSEC, it can be a very powerful tool, but it can also be dangerous because you don't want to push away people who could be assets to you. You don't want to write them off simply because they didn't agree with you politically or because they didn't want to do the work that you're doing or whatever the case is. You need to take it on a case-by-case basis and decide how far you're willing to go to keep people away and then plan for that eventuality. With OPSEC, there are easy ways to keep things under wraps. When you come home from a supply run at the grocery store, pull your vehicle into the garage and close the garage door before you unload the trunk so that neighbors don't see you unloading, 15 cases of water. If you order a lot of things online, don't have them all delivered to the house. Mm-hmm. Have some of them delivered at works. Get a P.O. box and have things delivered there. I did that for years. I worked about 35 miles away from home. I didn't want to wait till the end of the day when I got home to get my goodies from the post office. I would just have them delivered to a P.O. box I rented near my office. That way I could get my knives and my goodies right away. Avoid being vocal about certain things that would indicate you're probably a prepper, or you're prepper adjacent. Mm-hmm. You got to use your head. I'm in a position where everybody knows I'm a prepper by virtue of what I do.
No way.
I know, hard to believe. And I will admit that there are times where that makes me uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because I've had people who have suggested that in the event of a crisis, they're just going to come to my place. And these aren't family, these aren't friends, these aren't loved ones. These are people who just found me online, read my books, saw my podcast, whatever the case is, and decided that, they're not going to bother prepping. They're just going to come to Jimmy's house.
And people who have personal crisis too will come to people who, Brian, I'm sure this happens to you all the time, with their handout.
Yeah.
Every day.
I'm in crisis. Give me a handout.
Every day. And I help who I can. There's far more I don't help. And I know that makes me sound cold and callous, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Called a boundary.
If I help everybody, then I'd be the one with my hand out. And not to the extent that Jim gets it, but we have all three of us have a dear friend. He's an author whose day job is working for one of the alphabet agencies, and he's a certified badass with 2 years till he retires. He lives in DC, in the nation's capital. And when things were getting very bad a few years ago, his wife said to him, "Tell me you have a plan." They have 2 young daughters. Tell me you have a plan. And he said, "Oh, I have a plan. Our plan is to drive north to Keen's house. I'm about 90 minutes away from them." That was his plan.
Yeah.
And he would have been accepted here because there are skills he. That was weird. The screen blinked out for a moment, but we're still recording. They're probably listening in right now.
They're like, it wasn't me.
But yeah, I've cautioned both my sons growing up. This is a different kind of OPSEC, but I think it ties in here with what we're talking about. Their father is a minor celebrity. Okay. And there have been times when people have shown up at the house. There have been times in their lives as kids where people have approached them because of who their father is. So there are some things that they do in life. Number one is they don't tell people who their father is or what he does. You can apply that same mindset to prepping. I am vocal of my firearm usage and training and ownership for that reason. Someone who is not as prominent, someone who, just goes to work at the office every day and then comes home and prep, you probably would not want to be
right
that vocal about it. I am, to the point when I got swatted, our local police department showed up in force with the SWAT team and staged over at the river because they knew the amount of firepower I have in here. And I don't blame them for that. I know all those guys. They reacted properly. But, I've taught my boys that no matter where you go in life now, you are on camera and you need to treat it as such. Every business or office building or retail store you go to, you're on camera. If you live in a suburban neighborhood, most of your neighbors now have doorbell cams or some kind of camera. Traffic lights have cameras. You need to conduct yourself at all times as if you're being monitored, because you probably are. They can right here. If you've got one of these in your pocket, people can find where you are at any minute. That ties in with OPSEC, and it also ties in with OPSEC for preppers. To get back to what Jim was saying, when you're ordering your goodies, when you're, now if you're buying food and water, that's one thing. But if you're buying ammunition or knives or bulk medical supplies, you may want to watch how you're doing that, because chances are it's being tracked, it's being cataloged somewhere, and you're ending up on a file somewhere.
There's artificial intelligence and like digital learning attached to every single platform, especially your groceries, especially Amazon. They've been doing it for years before it became a hot topic. to curate to you things that you're likely to buy. But at the same time, and as authors, like we do a lot of crazy research on Google or our whatever platform that we use to search. And we often joke that we're on some sort of list just based on our search history.
Right.
But at the same time, when it comes to things of this nature, sometimes it's not a joke. And then being conscious of that and what you want to search, you could do your research at the library, find the information that like the books that you want to purchase, and then go to your bookstore and pay cash for them.
Right.
Even pre-Google, Jim, you're old enough to probably remember Paladin Press. Do you remember Paladin Press?
Oh yeah.
For our younger readers, Paladin Press was a publisher. They published books, which were things we all went to before the internet. Now, for the most part, what they published were declassified military training manuals, hand-to-hand combat, knife combat, where to place demolition charges on bridges. It's all the same information you can get on the internet now. It's not declassified, but back then it put them on the radar of a lot of people. Then they published this book. It was basically how to become a hitman.
Yep.
Now it turns out in real life, this book was written by a housewife in Florida who tried writing it as a fictional novel, couldn't sell it, reworked it to make it sound like it was a hitman who'd written a how-to book, sold a bazillion copies.
Good for her.
But a friend of mine who retired from an alphabet agency and who was employed back in the 80s when Paladin Press was a big thing, told me, he said jokingly, he said, "Did you ever buy anything from Paladin Press?" I said, "Yeah, when I was a teenager, I had the complete book of Dirty Tricks and Get Even, all the George titles." He said, "Then you ended up on a list." Yep. I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "But it was pre-internet." He said, "Doesn't matter."
Oh, wow.
If you were buying books from them, you were on a list. And then we'd sort that information. Who's buying what? How much are they buying? So, yeah, you need to be mindful of these things in your preps.
Now, there's an interesting footnote to that How to Be a Hitman book. The reason how it came out, who the author was because a guy bought that book and used it as a manual and killed somebody. And the family sued Paladin Press for publishing that book. And that it came out in the court that it was just this little housewife, middle of nowhere, who decided to write this book. I was a regular customer of Paladin Press for years. When they were going out of business, I bought a ton of stuff because they were going to be going out of business. They weren't going to be publishing anymore. Now, my understanding is that a lot of the books they published, the rights were reverted back to the authors. And a lot of those authors subsequently either signed on with a different publisher or self-published. I know a few of them. But I had a literal case of books that I purchased from them in their last throes.
I think it's safe to say you're like tier 1 of the list, Jim Cobb.
Now, wait a minute.
Tier 1.
Eighth grade, we're doing a science fair. I decide that my buddy and our science fair project is on pipe bombs and improvised explosives. God. I ordered a couple of books from Paladin Press on how to do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was.
I've been on a list for a long time.
as a teenager, I was a big purchaser of their Practical Joke and Dirty Trick books, which was basically just
terror.
The anarchist cookbook on steroids. How to mess up parking meters, how to disrupt your local government meeting. Those and any ninja stuff that they I love their ninja books.
Ashita Kim wrote a lot of those books.
But getting back to OPSEC, because now that we've outed ourselves as owning these, we'll be on another list. That was very poor OPSEC on all our
terrible
all our parts. So bringing in the groceries, or maybe not buying all in bulk, staggering your purchases. watching who you talk about it with. What are some other things that our listeners can do to just general practice good operational security?
Well, we talked about gray man principles a few episodes back, and a lot of those apply to this as well. Flying under the radar, trying to avoid notice. Don't be in people's faces about this kind of stuff. There's a right way and a wrong way to talk about prepping. Okay. If you're wanting to, encourage others. Well, the analogy I like to use, and it invariably pisses some people off, but I still think it's valid. Do you know any NASCAR fans?
Yeah.
I mean, hardcore NASCAR fan. The kind of people who not only wear the shirts and the hats, they've got a little dish of motor oil that they bring out every week, so it smells like they're right there.
I have a nice mental picture of a NASCAR fan now.
Okay.
I can smell it.
Yeah. There are people who are like that about prepping, where every conversation you have with them somehow circles back to prepping in some way. And they go from 0 to 100 like that every single time.
Oh, that might be autism too. So your hyperfixation on something that's interesting.
Tomato,
but I agree. I mean, you can pinpoint them, you can pick them out, and you know that they're walking the talk.
Mm-hmm. And the problem is when people are like that, those around them aren't listening. They tune it out because oh yeah, Bobby's on his bullshit again. They're not convincing anybody of anything positive about preparedness. But the people who do engage are putting themselves on Bobby's radar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait. When I talked about, food storage, Joe over there, he talked about how he's got some freeze-dried food. I bet you he's a prepper. And it just, goes from there. Other people who are in the room can put 2 and 2 together as well. The math isn't hard. Okay. If you want to talk about prepping, one of the best ways I've found that's very non-intrusive and non-threatening, talk about movies and TV shows. Talk about The Walking Dead. Talk about, Jericho back when that was on the air. Talk about, there's all these different movies and TV shows that relate to disasters and end of the world and stuff like that. You can feel people out using those. And if you're paying attention, you can clue in pretty quick as to who's on board and who isn't, and then explore it from there if that's the ultimate goal.
A few episodes back, you guys gave me a really, really great tip about reaching out for like a neighborhood watch, even, and that being a good setting to, one, find people within your community that are like-minded and willing to work together, but then also identify the people who don't want to work together.
Yeah. OPSEC is important, and I want to make sure that our listeners and our viewers understand that. You don't want to be as open about your prepping as like I am, okay? But at the same time, recognize that it can hinder you from establishing relationships with like-minded people in your community if you're not careful. It's like any tool. You have to use it the right way. You have to use it properly. Not every tool is a hammer, and if that is your only tool, then every problem's a nail, and it just goes downhill from there.
That's a great analogy. I wonder, as we said, you want to ideally get others enthused about prepping, so that they will prep for themselves and it won't fall upon you. What is some language that we can use to do that. I mean, I guess one analogy that's always worked for me is it's like insurance. You know, I need car insurance, I need health insurance. This is a form of insurance, you know.
Yep. And that's all it is, you know. Prepping is one of those things that we invest in hoping we never need, just like insurance. You don't buy car insurance and then hope that you get in that wreck, you know, so you can use your policy. There are exceptions to that. I mean,
I was thinking about my roof, honestly.
But yeah, I mean, it's something I've used this when I've signed books. I've written in the book, I pray that you never truly need anything in this book.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because that's the ideal.
I always bring it back to COVID and just remind them of what they went without during COVID and like that, because everyone remembers that one damn thing that was their staple that they didn't have.
Yep.
It's not like these things don't happen. We've lived through it and we lived through it recently. History repeats itself. I also like to just like we have done here in this podcast is that we've come together to teach people who want to learn. If you don't want to learn, you're not going to tune into the podcast, but anyone who wants to has. I mean, that's another way you can raise awareness is just teach.
Yep. One of the other arguments that I've used successfully and that I've encouraged people is to talk about the financial impact of prepping. Prepping costs money. Don't get me wrong. Okay. It can be a substantial investment, but by planning ahead and prepping, you can eat tomorrow at today's prices, you know, and sometimes you need to read the room when you're talking to people about prepping and you're trying to get that buy-in from, you know, family members or friends or neighbors or whatever, and kind of gauge where their interests are. You know, and some people, they live by the wallet. You know, every decision they make is made with a financial aspect in mind. And if you explain to them that, look, last week eggs were $5. This week they're $7. Next week they're probably going to be $9. If I buy extra this week, then I'm eating next week's eggs using this week's prices, and I'm saving money in the long run. You know, you can't overstate the common sense element of preparedness. The problem is people get wrapped up in the bullshit end of it, where we're all just concerned about the end of the world and, you know, this, that, and the other. I'm not necessarily concerned that the world's going to end next week. I'm worried that, you know, I might not be able to buy groceries next week. So I want to make sure I've got enough food to feed my family.
I'm 57. I've lived in the country, rural Pennsylvania or West Virginia for almost all my life. I've yet to go through a nuclear war, zombie apocalypse, or alien invasion. But I've been through 17 blizzards, over 24 floods, a pandemic, and lots of other natural disasters. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But when it does, it's also going to be okay.
Oh, it's going to be okay.
Jim, I believe you have a new issue.
Yes.
Show it.
Coming out, right?
This is Prepper Survival Guide, How to Survive Disasters. This is our special edition coming out in stores. It's supposed to go on sale February 28th. Now, as a practical matter, that means anywhere from the middle of this week to the middle of March is when you'll find it in stores, because distribution takes a while. It's not instantaneous. Last year, the publisher stopped doing Prepper Survival Guide and was only going to do Backwoods Survival Guide. I went back to them and I convinced them to do this one-off because I wanted to show them that the interest in prepping is still out there. If you want to see more Prepper Survival Guide out in stores, buy this one. so that we
Okay.
can explain to the publisher that, yes, people want to see it. Now, in this one, you're going to have information on how to pack a go bag, how to plan an escape route, all kinds of checklist information. We talk about the wildfires out in California. We talk
Wow.
about terrorism in New Orleans. We talk about the floods in North Carolina and the real world impact of what it's like to be there and how to mitigate the risks if that kind of thing happens again. It's very topical, it's very informative. It was a lot of fun to put together. You'll find it anywhere magazines are sold: Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Tractor Supply, Barnes and Noble, grocery stores. You name it, they'll have it. And if they don't, we will have it available online. I don't have a link yet because they haven't put it up on the website yet. But once they do, it'll be all over social media. Then you can just order it direct from them.
And you really can get those magazines anywhere. I've written and published over 57 books. And my local convenience store has never carried one of those books. But every time I've written an article for Prepper Survival Guide, I go in and, hey, Mr. Keen, we got this magazine over here.
Oh, goodness.
Nice.
Nice to see it back on the racks.
Yeah. I'm hoping it sells as well as I think it will.
Awesome. Good. I know one's coming to this house for sure.
All right. Well, I guess next week, folks, we are going to wrap things up probably.
Yep.
Probably.
As we told you when we started this series, it wasn't going to be an ongoing. It was going to be a limited series.
Mm-hmm.
We give you all the basics on prepping, teach you, what we know to get you started, and you could face things a little bit better. Hopefully, we've achieved that. But we do have a final wrap up for you next week, and we're not going to take it offline. The shows will still be there. You can come back and you can listen to us anytime you want. Now, a lot of people out there really like listening to Dacia, so we can't take that away.
No. No, you guys are great.
I think you should reassure them that it's going to be okay. Just
you guys, it is going to be okay. I mean, even if we're not sending out new episodes every week, everything we said it stands the test of time. Like these aren't new concepts that we're sharing, so it's going to be okay.
It is.
See you next week, folks.